Anna looked like the kind of woman who had everything under control, always polished in her tailored blazers, hair immaculately tied back, and her schedule running like clockwork. She was the epitome of professionalism. Her suburban life mirrored her corporate one. Immaculate, structured, and by the book. But what no one realized, perhaps not even Anna herself, was that beneath this composed facade was a woman who was slowly unraveling. It was a chilly Monday evening in mid-November 2021 in downtown Chicago. The city streets were aglow with golden streetlights that reflected on the wet pavement after a sudden rain shower. The office building where Anna worked stood tall, a monolith of glass and steel, still buzzing faintly as the workday bled into overtime for the ambitious or overburdened. Anna found herself among the latter as she sat in the conference room with a pile of reports that had to be finalized by morning. Her phone buzzed beside her. A text from her husband, Eric. "Don't work too late, love. Dinner's in the fridge. Miss you." She smiled faintly at the message, but it was the kind of smile that felt more like a reflex than an emotion. Eric was perfect, almost annoyingly so. He adored her, supported her career, and always tried to make her life easier. Yet, somehow, his perfection was suffocating. Anna had just decided to call it a night when Alexander walked in. He wasn't like anyone else in the office, confident to the point of arrogance, with sharp, piercing eyes that seemed to see through every pretense. He carried himself like someone who was used to getting his way, and there was something intoxicatingly magnetic about him. He flashed her a wry smile. "Burning the midnight oil, huh? What's the point of climbing the corporate ladder if it eats you alive?" he teased, setting his laptop bag on the table. Anna's heart gave a strange flutter. "Says the guy still here after hours," she quipped, but her voice wavered slightly, betraying the effect his presence had on her. He shrugged, leaning against the table, his gaze never leaving hers. "I guess some things are worth staying late for." It was subtle, the way his words lingered in the air, but Anna felt the heat rise to her cheeks. She laughed awkwardly, brushing it off, but she couldn't ignore the tension that had suddenly charged the room. The next few weeks passed in a blur of meetings, deadlines, and stolen moments. Alexander's presence had become a constant undercurrent in Anna's life. It started small, lingering eye contact during team briefings, the accidental brushing of hands when passing files, inside jokes shared over coffee breaks. It was harmless, or so she told herself, but deep down, she knew she was playing with fire. One night, just before Thanksgiving, the office had emptied out early. The city's holiday spirit was in full swing, and most employees had left to enjoy the festivities. But Anna stayed behind, citing a client deadline as her excuse. She wasn't surprised when Alexander appeared in her doorway, holding 2 steaming cups of coffee. "Figured you might need this," he said, setting one down in front of her. "You didn't have to," she replied, though she made no effort to stop him as he pulled out the chair beside her. He shrugged, leaning back in the chair with an easy confidence. "Sometimes, people deserve a little extra effort." Anna's pulse quickened. She tried to focus on the spreadsheet in front of her, but his proximity made it impossible. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. She couldn't ignore the way his knee brushed against hers under the table, or the way his eyes seemed to darken as they watched her. "Anna," he said suddenly, his voice lower, almost a whisper. "What are we doing?" She froze, her mind racing. What were they doing? She had a husband, a stable life, a future planned out to the last detail. This wasn't supposed to happen. But then he leaned closer, his hand covering hers. The touch was electric, sending a shiver down her spine. She faltered, unable to find the words. The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken desires. Then, without thinking, she leaned in. The kiss was tentative at first, a testing of boundaries, but it quickly deepened, their mutual restraint giving way to something far more primal. It was reckless, dangerous, and utterly exhilarating. Anna didn't go home that night. She couldn't face Eric, not after what she'd just done. Instead, she drove aimlessly through the city, the taste of Alexander still on her lips and the weight of her guilt pressing down on her chest. She tried to rationalize it, telling herself it was a one-time mistake, a momentary lapse in judgment. But deep down, she knew it wasn't that simple. When she finally pulled into her driveway, the house was dark. Eric had left a note on the counter, reminding her about their plans to visit his parents for Thanksgiving. She crumpled it in her hand, her stomach twisting with shame. How could she look him in the eye after what she'd done? But even as she tried to suppress it, a part of her couldn't stop replaying the night in her head. The way Alexander had looked at her, touched her. It was unlike anything she'd ever experienced. The next morning at work, everything seemed normal on the surface. Alexander greeted her with the same cocky smirk, but there was an unspoken understanding between them. They were playing a dangerous game, one that could destroy everything if they weren't careful. But as the weeks went on, Anna found herself unable to stay away. Every stolen glance, every whispered conversation, every secret rendezvous only pulled her deeper into his orbit. She was caught in a web of her own making, torn between the life she'd built and the desires she could no longer ignore. And then, one evening in early December, everything came crashing down. Anna had just returned to her desk after a meeting when she found an envelope waiting for her. It was unmarked, with her name scrawled across the front in an unfamiliar hand. Her heart raced as she opened it, pulling out a single photograph. It was a picture of her and Alexander in the meeting room that first night, their kiss frozen in time. Her blood ran cold as she realized what it meant. Someone knew. The message on the back was simple but chilling. Careful, Anna. Secrets don't stay buried forever. She stared at the photo, her mind racing. Who had taken it? And what did they want? The room seemed to tilt around her as the weight of the situation settled over her. She was no longer just playing with fire. She was standing in the middle of an inferno. The photograph haunted Anna for the rest of the day. She tucked it into her bag, her fingers trembling as she glanced around the office, trying to spot anyone who might be watching her. Everything suddenly felt sinister. A lingering glance from the receptionist, a co-worker's offhand smile. Even Alexander seemed strangely aloof when they crossed paths, offering her nothing more than a casual nod before vanishing into a conference room. When she got home that night, Eric was waiting for her in the kitchen. The smell of roasted chicken filled the air, but Anna's stomach churned at the sight of him. He was setting the table, his usual easy smile on his face. "Long day?" he asked, pouring her a glass of wine. She nodded mutely, slipping the photograph deeper into her purse as she set it down on the counter. "Yeah, just a lot of meetings." Eric chuckled. "You work too hard, you know? Maybe it's time we take that vacation we've been talking about? Somewhere warm. Mexico. Maybe?" His sincerity made her chest tighten with guilt. She mumbled something noncommittal, avoiding his gaze as she excused herself to shower. Once the door was locked behind her, she sank onto the edge of the tub, pulling the photograph out of her bag. The sight of it still sent a chill down her spine. Who could have taken it? The office had been nearly empty that night, and she couldn't recall hearing or seeing anyone nearby. And the note. Secrets don't stay buried forever. What did they want from her? Money? A confession? Or was it something worse? The next morning, Anna arrived at the office early, hoping to confront Alexander before anyone else arrived. She found him in his glass-walled office, leaning back in his chair as he scrolled through his phone. He glanced up when she entered, his expression instantly guarded. "Anna," he said, setting the phone down. "What's going on? You look like you've seen a ghost." She shut the door behind her, pulling the photo out of her purse and slamming it onto his desk. "This," she hissed. "This is what's going on." Alexander's eyes narrowed as he picked up the photograph, his jaw tightening as he flipped it over to read the note. "Where did you get this?" "It was left on my desk yesterday." No envelope, no explanation. Just this. His expression darkened. "You think someone's trying to blackmail you?" "I don't know. But whoever it is, they know about us. They have proof, Alex. What if they show this to Eric? Or my boss? I could lose everything." Her voice was rising, panic creeping in despite her best efforts to stay calm. Alexander stood, closing the blinds on his office windows before turning back to her. "Okay, listen to me. First of all, We don't know who sent this, so let's not jump to conclusions. Did you notice anything unusual yesterday? Anyone acting suspicious? Anna shook her head, pacing the room. I've been racking my brain, but I can't think of anyone who would do this. It's not like we've been flaunting it. Not exactly, Alexander muttered, his tone dry. He held up the photo again. Whoever took this had to be close enough to see us. That narrows it down. That doesn't help if we don't know who it is, she snapped. What are we supposed to do? Just wait for them to ruin our lives. Alexander's eyes locked onto hers, his expression calm but intense. No, we find out who it is, and we stop them. The following days were a blur of paranoia and covert investigation. Anna and Alexander began analyzing everything: security camera angles, office seating charts, even employees' work schedules. But every lead seemed to end in a dead end, and the constant fear of exposure was wearing on both of them. Anna was jumpy at home, unable to meet Eric's gaze for more than a few seconds at a time. Her nerves frayed further when he asked if she was okay, his concern only amplifying her guilt. She knew she was hurting him, but every time she thought about confessing, the image of that photograph stopped her cold. Then, one evening, something happened that threw her world even further off balance. She was heading to her car after work, the winter air biting at her cheeks, when she noticed a figure lingering near her vehicle. At first, she thought it was a stranger, but as she got closer, she realized it was Laura, the HR director. Laura was known for being nosy, always sticking her nose where it didn't belong. But this felt different. Anna, Laura called out, her breath visible in the cold air. Can we talk for a minute? Anna hesitated, clutching her keys tightly. About what? Laura stepped closer, her expression unreadable. I think you know. Anna's heart dropped. I don't know what you're talking about. Laura gave her a pitying look, reaching into her bag and pulling out an envelope. She handed it to Anna without a word. Inside was another photograph. This one of her and Alexander in the elevator, their heads close together as they laughed at some private joke. You need to be more careful, Laura said quietly. People are starting to notice. Anna stared at her, the blood draining from her face. How long have you? Long enough, Laura interrupted. But I'm not the one you should be worried about. Someone else is watching, Anna, and they're not as forgiving as I am. That night, Anna couldn't sleep. Laura's cryptic warning replayed in her mind, mixing with her own growing paranoia. She began to wonder if this wasn't about blackmail at all. What if it was something more personal? What if the person watching her wasn't after money, but revenge? The thought was terrifying, but it wasn't until she checked her email the next morning that the true gravity of the situation hit her. An email had arrived from an untraceable address. The subject line was simple: TikTok. Attached was another photograph, this one taken through her living room window. It showed her and Eric sitting on the couch, oblivious to the camera's gaze. Anna's hands shook as she read the message beneath the photo. You've been playing a dangerous game, Anna. Time to pay the price. Her stomach turned as she realized the stakes had just been raised. This wasn't just about her and Alexander anymore. Someone was targeting her family, and they weren't playing by the rules. Anna stared at the email, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. Whoever this person was, they had been watching her, not just at work, but in her own home. The photograph was grainy, but the implications were razor sharp. Her sanctuary, her carefully constructed life, was no longer safe. This wasn't just about her affair. This was personal, calculated, and deeply invasive. Her phone buzzed on the counter, breaking her spiraling thoughts. It was Alexander. She hesitated before answering, her voice shaking. Alex. Anna, you need to come to the office. Now, he said, his voice low and urgent. It's 6 in the morning. What's going on? Just come, he snapped, and then hung up. 20 minutes later, Anna arrived at the office, her nerves frayed. The city was still waking up, the streets quiet except for the occasional car passing by. The fluorescent lights of the building cast an eerie glow as she stepped into the empty lobby and rode the elevator to Alexander's floor. He was waiting for her in his office, pacing like a caged animal. As soon as she entered, He locked the door behind her. "What's this about?" she asked, crossing her arms to steady herself. Instead of answering, he handed her a folder. Inside were printed copies of emails, her emails, messages she had sent to Alexander, conversations laced with flirtation, plans, and confessions. There were even screenshots of text messages between them. "Where did you get these?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "They were sent to me this morning," Alexander replied, running a hand through his hair. "From the same anonymous email address that sent you that photo. Whoever this is, they've been digging through our lives. They've hacked your account, Anna." Her knees nearly gave out. She collapsed into a chair, her mind reeling. This is insane. Who would go this far? Alexander's face hardened. "That's what I've been trying to figure out. But there's more." He pulled another photograph from his desk drawer and placed it in front of her. It was of Eric, her husband, standing outside a coffee shop, talking to a woman Anna didn't recognize. The timestamp on the photo was from 2 days ago. "Why would they send this?" she asked, staring at the image. Alexander hesitated, then sat down across from her. "Because they want you to question everything. Look at what they're doing, Anna. They're not just exposing us. They're trying to destroy every part of your life." Anna's stomach churned. The walls were closing in, and she had no idea who was pulling the strings, or why. The breaking point came that evening. Anna was sitting in the kitchen, her hands trembling as she tried to focus on a glass of wine. Eric had gone upstairs to shower, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath their roof. The silence of the house was deafening until her phone buzzed with another email. This one was a video. Her heart pounded as she pressed play. The footage was grainy but clear enough. It showed Anna and Alexander in his office, locked in an embrace. The angle suggested it had been taken from outside the office, through the narrow slats of the blinds. A message accompanied the video. "It's over, Anna. Tell Eric, or I will." She couldn't breathe. The room spun as the weight of the ultimatum bore down on her. The idea of Eric finding out this way, through a faceless blackmailer, was unbearable. She had to tell him herself. With shaking hands, she climbed the stairs to their bedroom. Eric was sitting on the bed, scrolling through his phone. He looked up with a smile that immediately faded when he saw her face. "What's wrong?" he asked, setting his phone down. Anna stood frozen in the doorway, clutching the phone in her hand. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Tears streamed down her face as she finally blurted out, "Eric, I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you a long time ago." He sat up straighter, his expression unreadable. "Okay," he said slowly. "Go ahead." Before she could continue, the bedroom door slammed open. Anna jumped, her heart nearly stopping as Alexander barged in, his face pale and frantic. "Anna, don't," he shouted. "You don't understand." Eric stood, confusion and anger flashing across his face. "What the hell is going on?" he demanded, looking between the two of them. Alexander ignored him, his focus entirely on Anna. "I know who's behind this. It's Laura." Anna stared at him, dumbfounded. "Laura? From HR?" He nodded, his breathing ragged. "She's been obsessed with me for years. I didn't realize it until now, but she's the one who's been watching us, taking photos, sending emails. She's trying to ruin you because she thinks I'll go back to her if you're out of the picture." Eric's face darkened, and he turned to Anna. "What does he mean, go back to her? What's going on between the two of you?" Anna's chest tightened, her shame threatening to choke her. "Eric, But before she could finish, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a live feed. Laura's face appeared on the screen. Her lips curled into a sinister smile. Well, Laura said, her voice dripping with venom. "What a cozy little scene. I hope you're enjoying yourselves, because this is just the beginning." "Laura, stop this." Alexander shouted at the phone. "You're insane." She laughed. "Oh, Alex. You always did underestimate me. You think this is about you? No, sweetheart. This is about Anna. She's the one who has everything I ever wanted. And now, I'm going to take it all away." The screen went black. The days that followed were a whirlwind of chaos. Laura's campaign of destruction escalated, her attacks growing bolder and more public. She leaked the video of Anna and Alexander to their co-workers, ensuring the scandal spread like wildfire. Eric, devastated and furious, filed for divorce and moved out of the house. Alexander, despite his attempts to shield Anna, resigned from the company in disgrace. Laura's motives eventually came to light when the police got involved. She had spent years secretly collecting information on her co-workers, using her position in HR to fuel her obsession with control. The scandal rocked the company, leading to multiple firings and lawsuits. Laura was arrested, but the damage she'd caused was irreparable. For Anna, the fallout was life-altering. Her marriage was over, her career in ruins, and her reputation tarnished. She moved out of the suburbs, leaving behind the life she'd so carefully built. And yet, in the ashes of her old life, she found a strange kind of freedom. For the first time in years, she wasn't living a lie. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was hers to navigate. Sometimes, destruction paves the way for something new, even if the path is littered with the wreckage of everything you once held dear.